Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, our viewers. Welcome to CyberGuard Lounge monthly webinar. I am Kelechi Ase, the technical lead of CyberGuard Lounge. CyberGuard Lounge is an IT company. We are into educating and informing some businesses the knowledge or skills they need to navigate the digital world, the cybersecurity risk management, digital forensics, incident response, security assessments, consulting, and education. We are having our monthly webinar on data privacy this month, and our speaker here today will be Mr. Dipo Adewumi. He will be enlightening us on this session to talk to us about data privacy and the need for having a confidential assets. So let's welcome Mr. Dipo Adewumi to this live session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelechi Ase, for having me on this edition of webinar of courtesy CyberGuard Lounge Limited. As he has mentioned, CyberGuard Lounge Limited is a global IT services organization with specialty in cybersecurity. As we all know, in this digital world now, the need for cybersecurity cannot be overemphasized. And there's a need for us to secure all kinds of information system assets, be it the public assets, the private assets, or even the personal assets. And today we are going to be looking at a very exciting topic. We do talk so much about cybersecurity, but what about cyber privacy? So at CyberGuard Lounge, we are at the cutting edge of security knowledge information research, and we are bringing to you the concept of cyber privacy. I will be sharing my screen straight away as I will take us through the first part of the age of cyber privacy. Okay, so this is my screen. Courtesy CyberGuard Lounge, we have brought to you this very exciting presentation on the age of cyber privacy. We do talk so much about cybersecurity. In fact, the digital world or the information age we live in today is not complete without cybersecurity. However, there is a subset of cybersecurity, which is cyber privacy, that is quite critical, and we need to know a lot about it. As we go into this presentation for the day, there are some notable quotes that I want to just share with us to spice up this presentation. The first one is by Bill Nelson, which says, if we don't act now to safeguard our privacy, we could all become victims of identity theft. And another one from the famous preacher, Billy Graham. Once you've lost your privacy, you realize you've lost an extremely valuable thing. And the third one that I'm going to be sharing with us for the day is, privacy is not an option, and it shouldn't be the price we accept for just getting on the internet. Now, take a moment to ponder on these three notable quotes on cyber privacy, or the concept of privacy. Now, the content for this webinar are: the first one, who are you? Do you think you really have an identity? And if you do, is it important? Is it valuable? And we're going to look at personality in light of privacy. Then we look also at the concept of security as against privacy. So if we're talking about security, why is then the need of privacy in addition to it? And we also look at the privacy attacks, the regulations and standard frameworks around privacy. How can we implement privacy for an individual and for wide range of organizations? So, which is all about leading privacy. And the last but not the least is introducing us to the concept of privacy architecture. Now, as the presenter, my name is Dipo Adewumi. I'm a member of CyberGuard Lounge team, and I have very rich background in security. That can also be seen with some certifications that I've had in security domain. And there is one that stands out, and that is I'm also a certified data privacy solution engineer being offered by ISACA. So you are in the right place. So yes, you have an expert speaking to you on the concept of privacy. Now, the question is, who are you? Who exactly are you? Or are you like this person in the picture who is already mixed up with the crowd? But trust me, I must say that everybody has an identity. And no matter how vast we are in terms of the population of the world, every person has an identity. Now, are you a crowd, or do you have an identity? Or if we look at it from the technology or computing point of view, where all the data are completely broken down to bits in terms of zeros and ones, and where human identities can also be broken down into zeros and ones. Or now the question is, do you just consider yourself as a composition of just ordinary zeros and ones? I don't want to believe so. The question is, are you sure of your worth? If your name is being mentioned in a wrong location at the moment, what do you think will be the implications? If your bank account gets into a fraudster, what do you think will be the implications? If the information about your daily itineraries, about your movement in and out of your house is being shared in the public domain, what do you think would be the implications? So we're just talking about what is the worth of your identity, your personal information. Now, I want to shock you. Do you know that organizations spend so much to acquire or to make huge financial gains from trading with personal data? Yes, many corporate organizations worldwide, they spend so much money, billions perhaps of dollars, to acquire personal information. And they also spend such money in order to process this information and use it for their business insights. In order to gain certain business insights, to make projection about their business activities. And so you will realize that this personal information we're talking about, it's very, very important and should be properly managed. So what is all about personality preservation? The first thing is we look at privacy. Privacy is an hand-to-hand work effort to protect and control the use of personal information. And when we're talking about personal information, we're talking about your name, we're talking about your gender, we're talking about things that can be used, or information or records that can be used to personally identify you, about who you are. Is information security not enough? Why privacy? Okay, the thing is this: violation of privacy laws and regulation often results into huge financial losses, reputational damage, and loss of market share for businesses. There is a need for us to answer that question. Is information security not enough? How do we answer this question? Let's take a look at it. As we look at security on one hand and privacy on the other hand, I want to say that these two concepts are mutually inclusive. There is that mutual inclusivity between security and privacy. Look at the security as the bigger picture and privacy as a subset of security. A very good way for me to do this illustration is you look at this pregnant woman who is carrying a baby in her womb. The truth is this. We cannot just say, oh, this is a pregnant woman in an isolation. But we must also recognize that the pregnant woman also have another human life within her. So the baby also have its own life. So baby has a life of its own too. So security lays the groundwork for safeguarding PII. PII is personally identifiable information. So privacy at maturity at its own life too. So it's just like a baby, that is coming out from the woman's womb. The baby has its own life too and must be treated as a human being. So that is the illustration between security and privacy. Now, we need to understand that the concept of privacy has become very important in the age we live in. And much more because certain attacks are actually targeting the privacy in the world we live in today. We have attacks such like impersonation. There is also the one that are being enabled by the emerging technologies called the deep fakes. We have attacks such as nudification, where people will literally get people's picture, faces, and use certain emerging tools to nudify such pictures and begin to circulate the nude picture in quotes of such an individual. That's really terrible. We have issues of account takeover, where people's social media account will literally be taken over and they will be used to swindle other people's, maybe, the contacts, the relatives of the victim. They will use it to swindle them, to defraud them and do all kinds of malicious activities. We have the issues of blackmail, extortion, personal data exfiltration. We have the issue of SIM jacking or SIM cloning, when people will take over somebody's phone number account and they will use it to defraud other people or to execute some malicious activities. We have the cases of phishing, password attacks, and even eavesdrops. And it goes on and on. This list here is not exhaustive. So we have so much attacks against privacy. And that's the reason why privacy should be brought even to the front burner and should be taken seriously as much as we take the holistic cybersecurity issues in importance. We have actions against, there are actions against privacy attacks, through regulations that are growing day by day. And I want to say that privacy concept is not entirely new. It's been around for a while, but it's becoming, it's becoming more popular in the age we live in today because of the proliferation of personal information. Personal information are being gathered in, across various human sectors, of endeavor. Is it in the financial world, in the healthcare, transportation, government agencies, and the likes? But the question is, how secure are these personal information that are being gathered? And how can this information also be protected from attackers or people that have malicious intent, that want to use it for nefarious activities? So there are certain regulations that have come up over the years to guide against attack targeted at privacy. We have Australian Privacy Act of 1988, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, that's HIPAA, Personal Information Protection and Electronic Document Act that's PIPEDA of 2004, that's in Canada. We also have that of Nigeria, that's Nigeria Data Protection Regulation, NDPR of 2020. Californian Privacy Consumer Act, that's quite popular, that's CCPA of 2020. Even in China, we have Personal Information Protection Law of 2021. Graham Leach Billy of Arts, GLBA of 1999, also from the United States of America. Also in the United Kingdom, there is the DPA, Data Protection Act of 2018. And we have them, you know, there are so many regulations that are coming up around privacy, which shows that privacy is a big deal in the 21st century that must not be taken lightly. Then the action against privacy attack continues. We have certain privacy standards. We have the international standards like ISO 27701 of 2019, ISO 27001 of 2022 as well. The NIST, that's security and privacy. That's then NIST privacy framework and NIST privacy cybersecurity framework. We have the regional standard of the GDPR. I'm going to be speaking about the GDPR shortly. The CCPA, as I've spoken about, the PIPEDA of Canada. We have the industry-specific standards. For example, the HIPAA, which is majorly on the X sector. The PCI DSS, you know, that's for the retail sector. That's the payment card industry data security standard, the GLBA. Then we have the other notable standard, the EU-US Privacy Shield, Swiss-US Privacy Shield. So the privacy standards could be categorized, you know, based on the international standards, the regional standards, the industry specifics, as well as, you know, other notable standards. As I've said earlier on, these standards that I've highlighted here, they are not exhaustive. We have so many standards and more, and many are coming on board. So it is good for us to get ourselves familiarized with this standard, particularly the security professionals who are in various organizations and will be handling personal identifiable information. There is a need for such professionals to get familiar with the standards that are applicable in their industry, in their region, and also with those data they are processing. For example, in the case of GDPR, it is not limited to Europe alone, because if, for example, I'm in Africa and I'm processing some personally identified information for European citizens or from data from Europe, then I am bounded by the GDPR Act. So that is another trick when it comes to, you know, the enforcement of these privacy standards, and there is a need for us to know them very well. Now, I will use the GDPR as like a study case among all the standards or all the regulations for privacy. GDPR, which was passed by the European Union, is described as the toughest international privacy and security law. It imposes obligation on organizations that target and collect data related to people in the European Union. So GDPR is considered to be the toughest international privacy and security law, and there's a need for us to pay a very keen attention to it. Security professionals need to have a good understanding of what GDPR is all about. The key terms under GDPR include personal data. So what is it when we say a data is personal? Personal data are, it's basically information related to an individual who can be directly or indirectly identified. So when we talk about personal data, it is something that can be related to an individual. For example, my name, my gender, my phone number, my account number, my social security number. These are personal information that we can categorize as personal data. The other concept is data processing. What is data processing? Data processing is any manner or automated action performed on data. So simply processing such a data. And in the world we live in today, personal data are being processed every now and then. Then we go to the aspect of this data subject. Who is a data subject? A data subject is the individual whose data is processed. So if I collect your data, for example, I collect your phone number, I collect your residential address, I collect your name, and I use it for something, you as a person, you are the data subject. And you have certain rights under the GDPR of what should happen to your data or how your data should be managed. As we go on in the course of this presentation, we're going to see those rights of a data subject. The next person or the next key term under the GDPR is the data controller. Data controller is the person who decides why and how personal data is processed. So data controller in most cases could be an organization who has collected, several individuals' personal data for processing. And the other one is data processor. Data processor is a third party that processes personal data on behalf of data controller. Now, this is the clarification. Many a times when data controller collects personal data of a data subject, the data controller may not be the one that will primarily process it. The data controller may transfer this information to a third party to process on his behalf. Now, the question is, in the process of transmitting those personal data to the data processor, what happens? Are there security controls that are being put in place to ensure that this personal information is properly safeguarded? Take, for instance, when it comes to personal data that has to do with someone's health status, that should not be in the public domain, and this information had to be processed. What happened in that instance? Are there proper security control in place to ensure that the transmission of this personal information from the data controller to the data processor and back to the data controller, are there sufficient security controls to ensure that this information is not leaked and is not used for malicious purposes? Continue under the GDPR. The data protection and accountability principle. There are certain major principles when it comes to the GDPR, and it is good for us to have a very good understanding of these principles. And these principles can be applicable, when it comes to dealing with privacy, when it comes to safeguarding personal information of individuals in any form. The first part of that principle is, when it comes to the collection of personal information, it should be done, there should be lawfulness, fairness, and transparency to all data subjects. There should be that, that information should be done in a lawful way, in fairness, and should be transparent. Also, we have purpose limitation to the legitimate purposes explicitly specified to the data subject. In other words, you collect personal information of individual just to the limit of what is required, nothing more than that. The purpose, there should be a limitation to that purpose. Not that, okay, for example, an organization wants to collect personal information of people. Maybe in the financial services sector, information such as age, information such as phone number could be collected. But if such an organization is now requesting for health information of such an individual, then we know that that is a breach of purpose limitation. So it should be limited to that particular purpose. It is also similar to data minimization as well. Restrict data collection and processing to as much as data as necessary for the specified purposes. So data collection of personal identifiable information should be limited to the specific purposes. If it is just to collect the basic information about the person, there is no need to collect much more than that. Otherwise, that will result into a higher liability for the data controller. And also, the other principle is accuracy. Accuracy of personal data must be maintained and kept up to date. It is very important. And that's the reason, as security or privacy professionals in any organization, there is a need to always update personal information of the data subject every now and then. The accuracy is really important. Storage limitation of personally identifying data is only for as long as necessary for the purpose specified. There are certain organizations that I know have worked with a particular sector that under the regulation, within that sector, the organizations within that sector are only allowed to hold on to their customers' information for a period of several years. So any customer that is not active for a period of 7 years, the regulation allowed them to expunge or to erase completely such personal information from their databases. So it is really important that when it comes to collection of personal information, the principle of storage limitation is also brought on board. The other principle is the principle of integrity and confidentiality. It is a must for data processing to ensure its security. So the data must be intact in terms of completeness. The data also must be protected, safeguarded against undue exposure or being divulged, to the public domain. And the last principle is the principle of accountability. Accountability lies with the data controller to demonstrate GDPR compliance with all of these principles. So the principle of accountability majorly resides with the data controller. And data controller primarily is that entity, organization, or an individual that collects data, personal data from data subjects. So if in the case of, for example, privacy breach, the first person that is liable is the data controller. So those are the major principles around the GDPR. Now, as individuals, there's a need for everyone to know his or her rights when it comes to personal information. The first one is right to be informed. If my data or your data is being collected for one purpose or the other, then you need to be informed that, oh, your information is being collected and the other. And that also brings to the light where, people will just go to a particular, maybe a gathering or a function, they will bring out their phone and they will start taking other people's picture. That is very wrong. And people should be careful not to do that anymore in the public, because an individual has the right to decide if he wants its picture or its photographs to be taken or not. The right of access. The data subject has the right, of access to his personal information in any organization. In other words, if your personal information is being collected, let's say in an hospital, you could walk up to the hospital and say, okay, I want to access my information. I want to see how protected my information is. Then the third one is right of rectification. you have the right to review your personal information that have been collected by an organization and to see or to ensure that this information is right or up to date. And if not, you can request that the information should be corrected and should be made to be up to date. The fourth one is the individual also have the right of erasure. You have the right to say, oh, I want my personal information completely removed from an organization, storage system or database. The fifth one, the right to restrict processing. Many organizations also exchange personal information of people with other organizations for business purposes and all that. And some also use it, for business insights, when they will process the information to develop some form of consumer insight and the like, in order to make business projections and all that. You can say, look, I don't want my information to be involved in such processing. So you have the right as an individual, against such. Then the other one is the right to data portability. I think I've also added that to the fifth one, where you can say, look, I don't want you as an organization here to share my personal information with organization B. Also, the right to object. You can say, look, I don't want you to collect my information, for anything. The eighth one is rights concerning automated decision making and profiling. So you have the right, and when it comes to using automation to profile information or to profile people's personal information. So these are major rights that individuals they have when it comes to their personally identifiable information. And so the issue of privacy cannot be trivialized. It's a big deal. It's something that every individual should know. A lot of people don't even know their rights when it comes to their personal, the use of their personal information. Now, this aspect is leading privacy, which majorly focuses on a typical organization who wants to implement privacy in the organization. For example, let's imagine an organization today want to implement cybersecurity management, across board within the organization. There is a need also when it comes to organizations that process PII or personally identifiable information to implement some form of leadership around privacy within the organization, or let's say governance among privacy within the organization. So privacy leadership for any organization can be split into three major categories. The first one is the governance, the second one is management, the third one is the risk management. And under the governance essentially is all about the leadership of the organization, bringing the issue or the topic of privacy to the front burner, acknowledging the fact that privacy is quite critical to the success or the failure of the organization. So in other words, privacy is also about, is part of the strategic planning, the strategic vision of the organization. So, which means privacy as an entity is receiving the leadership support in such an organization. And the first part is governance. And governance involves the support of the board of directors of the organization, and also align the matter of privacy to the business vision. So if it's a business that has to handle personal information, then the handling of personal information must be aligned with the business strategic objectives in order to ensure that the organization is not in the breach of privacy. Because if the organization is in the breach of privacy, they could be violating for example, the GDPR Privacy Act and be liable to hefty fines that can lead to the organization going bankruptcy or reputational damage and so many other things. Then the other part of the governance is security and privacy collaboration. There is that synergy between security and privacy, like I've illustrated earlier on, is like that relationship between the mother and the baby. Security and privacy strategy development, commitment of resources to ensuring the right privacy measures within the organization, and also managing the challenges. That is in the domain of the governance. Now, in the domain of the management, we have the executive management giving the adequate support to the matter of privacy in any typical organization. Now, from the management support, it cascades down to the aspect of roles and responsibilities, where there will be definition of specific roles and responsibilities that will be managing the matter of privacy. Security and privacy, for example, steering committee can be set up in order to provide the right form of management around privacy. And from there, it goes down to the aspect of privacy operations, similar to security operations. And privacy also should be privacy by design in any organization, particularly when it comes to the deployment of certain technologies that will process privacy data. The design, the development, and the implementation of these technologies should be by privacy by design. In other words, as these technologies are being designed, privacy should be embedded in it, not an afterthought. And of course, the issue of assurance and audit to ensure that all the privacy controls are working as they should, and they are in compliance with the notable privacy standards and acts or regulations. The third aspect is risk management. When it comes to privacy, it's very similar to the security as well. We look at the risk management life cycle, the privacy impact assessment. That is really critical. I'm going to be speaking briefly about that. Privacy impact assessment is majorly about looking at how certain changes in business processes could impact the entity of privacy, or could impact the personally identifiable information being gathered by such an organization. And having understood or discovered what the impacts are, what are the essential controls or the adequate controls that could be put into place as countermeasures against, the risk of losses that are linked to those privacy data. And under the risk management as well, we look at the threats that are specifically against privacy data, vulnerabilities around the technologies being used to process privacy data. Now, this is the holistic pictorial diagram that depicts the risk management for privacy. We have the risk identification, risk analysis with the necessary inputs, the risk treatment with the right input as well, the risk assessment, and it goes on in that cycle. As we can see, for that risk identification, we have the program scope. For risk analysis, we have the asset valuation. We must first of all identify those assets, those information or personal information that needs to be protected. Then we look at, under the context of the organization risk appetite, and the proper risk analysis is done. And from there, it goes to the risk treatment. What are the proper treatments to be done in terms of mitigation or accepting the risk or probably transferring the risk to a third party? Certain actions must be done. And those actions are the real risk treatment action plan. Then, of course, we go to the aspect of the risk assessment, which is all about the threat adversary, vulnerability assessment of the potential attack. So this is the high-level cycle of the risk management around privacy data. Now, I have talked I mean, to some extent about privacy and privacy and privacy, there's a need for us to look at some few scenarios in order to make it to be more practical and have a very better understanding of privacy. Now, this is the scenario. Fast Tech Incorporation is a thriving startup that provides infotainment content as part of its strategic plan to compete favorably. It decided to digitize to establish a global presence. This action will require collecting, processing, storing, and disposing of customers' personally identifiable information. So Fastech had previously established a basic cybersecurity program to safeguard its information assets. Therefore, the company felt its readiness to go ahead, leveraging artificial intelligence to giving its existing security controls. So what that one is saying is, Fastech is, they want to be collecting PII of customers, and they felt, oh, because at the start of the organization, they had some basic cybersecurity controls in place. So they felt there will not be any need to have any more or additional controls in place, and they felt they were good to go. And what happened? A few months after digitization, Fastech's sensitive customers' PII was breached through open source AI integration. Humongous PII was leaked on the dark web. The continued operation of Fastech is now seriously threatened by hefty regulatory fines and a bad reputation. So, in other words, a few months after that digitization, Fastech sensitive customers' PII was breached. That was really bad. The question is, what should have been done to avoid this situation? What should have been done to avoid this situation? Well, this is what should have been done. Fastech Incorporation as a startup could have sought the advisory services of privacy professionals in cyber guidelines, for example. Yeah, because at cyber guidelines, there are competent professionals who are experienced when it comes to dealing with privacy data that could have offered professional advisory services that would have prevented this ugly scenario that affected Fastech Incorporation from taking place in the first place. Recommendation would have included prioritized privacy like security. It was good to know that Fastech had basic cybersecurity controls in place. However, they failed to prioritize privacy like security the moment they decided to be collecting their customer personal information. So there was a need for them to have done that, to have prioritized privacy like security. If they have done that, that would have also helped against this breach. The second thing they should have done is conduct a privacy impact assessment. That is PIA before digitization. When the proposal for digitization came, that was a change in their business processes and practices. And before they actually implemented it, they should have conducted a PIA, that is privacy impact assessment, to understand what are the loopholes, what are the gaps where the privacy data could actually be breached or be attacked. And that will have opened their eyes to specific controls against privacy, data, against privacy attack, really, from being happening. Then the third one is limit personal information, identifiable information collection to only data required for business operations. When an organization collects more personal information than necessary or required, the organization take up a higher risk, a higher liability. Listen again. When an organization, in the bid of digitization, and connecting with their customers, collect more personal information than necessary, the organization has decided to assume more liabilities than required. And that is not a good, it's not a good status to assume. The fourth one is implementation of privacy impact assessment recommendations. So from the conduct of the PIA for that second recommendation, there is a need to implement those recommendations from that conduct. That will have helped Fastech against the ugly incidents they eventually experienced. Now, practice questions. You are the privacy solution engineer professional within your multinational organization. Review proposed new technologies being requested for implementation within your facilities. You analyze how information is handled, ensuring that the handling complies with the legal, regulatory, and policy requirements regarding privacy that your organization is accountable to and for. What is this analysis? You will agree with me that the answer to this question is B, privacy impact assessment. For any organization that is handling personal data, the moment there is a need, maybe there is a new technology, a new business process is about to be introduced, there is a need to first and foremost conduct a privacy impact assessment to understand what will be the impact on the handling and processing of privacy data, of that particular new or proposed business process and technologies. The second question is, as a privacy specialist conducting a self-regulatory assessment questionnaire for a retail company, which one of these would the report best support? So if you as a privacy specialist in an organization, you are conducting a self-regulatory assessment questionnaire, what framework or what standard will your report best support? Is it GDPR, US HIPAA, EU Directive on Electronic Commerce, or PCI DSS? You will agree with me that the answer is D, PCI DSS. The reason is that organization is a retail company, and the regulations or the standard that actually supports the protection of privacy data or personal data for such a sector is the payment card industry data security standard, that is PCI DSS. Now, privacy architecture. This will be the last part of our webinar today. Under the privacy architecture, we have the infrastructure. I'm talking about the technology infrastructure, applications, and software, as well as technical privacy control. Infrastructure. What do we understand about infrastructure? When it comes to ensuring the right privacy control in any organization, the privacy professionals should also look beyond the data itself. They also need to pay very good attention to the technologies that are processing, that are storing, or that are transmitting the privacy data. Adequate understanding of the underlying technology used to handle stored personal information is critical to ensure privacy requirements. Key technology infrastructures involved in privacy are classified as this. We have the technology stacks. First and foremost, to me, that is the backbone, the technology stack. This includes a set of technology services that make up a system. For example, we have the LAMP, which could be the Linux, the Apache, the MySQL, as well as the front end of PL, PHP, and the Python. And in the Windows, we have the Windows, the IIS, the SQL, the ASP.NET, which we have the acronym of Wizard for. And these technology stacks must, the privacy professionals should ensure that there are the right controls, the right security controls are in place from one particular infrastructure integration with another integration, and the right update, the right patching, are in place to ensure that these technology stacks are actually secure enough to offer the sufficient protection for personal information. Then we look at the infrastructure of the cloud computing. Many things we do today are in the cloud. The cloud services include computers made available to customers as a service, virtual machines, software applications as a service, remote data storage, and network connectivity. And of course, we could see them as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and mobile device, of course, as a service. And we have the issues of shadow IT as well. I think I need to speak a little bit about the shadow IT. It's a typical practice in some organizations where employees could just download certain applications that are cloud-based in order to enhance their business practice or operation and the likes without the knowledge of the IT department. That is shadow IT. The question is, how secure are these applications, particularly when it comes to processing personal information? The privacy professionals in any organization must ensure that there are proper policies in place that is guiding, the use of shadow IT, or maybe against shadow IT in most cases, and to ensure that any customers' personal information that will be processed, and we involve cloud computing to ensure that there are sufficient, adequate controls in order to avoid against the unauthorized leakage of those information. The other aspect is the endpoint, where in the age of bring your own device, work from home, we have so many proliferation of Internet of Things devices, IoT, smartphones, smart tablets, and the likes and all that. And these devices, in most cases, are personal devices that are plugged into the corporate network. And unfortunately, some of these devices are not safe. So it is really, really important that securities should also ensure that whatever end user or endpoint devices that will be attached or that will be connected to a corporate network for the transmission, for the storage, for the processing of personal information, particularly of customers, these devices are also safe. They have the same security features or security requirements as the organization has stipulated it in their policies. And security tools to enhance endpoint security include application whitelisting, web content filtering, data loss protection, intrusion protection systems, network access control, CASB, mobile device management, and particularly zero trust architecture. That is really, really important. I will not have time to delve into the nitty-gritty of zero trust architecture today, but maybe in our subsequent webinar, we'll talk more about zero trust architecture. And the other one is the remote access. This is a medium of remote connectivity to internal corporate network via a data link, clients and clientless VPNs. So at times, particularly for employees that work from home and they want to access some sensitive information database on the corporate network, there's a need to connect in a safe or secure way. Using VPN is really, really important. And system handling, it's really important. So the hardening of system. And what is it all about? This describes techniques used to enhance the resistance of system and devices to attack, employ security and privacy by design. So in other words, you only configure certain features in any technological system for the purpose of use. Any other feature that is not required should be deactivated. That is part of the system hardening, in order to make it as difficult as possible for any potential attacker in order to breach such technology infrastructure to leak out personal or privacy data. And the aspect of application and software. Privacy and security by design is really important in any organization. And it is required that in coming up with new business processes that involve the handling of personal information or the deployment of new technology that will be processing personal information, there is a need to bring privacy, into it. There is a need to embed it right from the beginning. And that is all about privacy and security by design. It shouldn't be an afterthought. So the 7 fundamental principles of privacy and security by design include proactive and preventive. So it should be proactive and preventive, not reactive, not a remedial action. The second one is design embedded with privacy. Privacy. It's becoming increasingly critical in most organizations because we are in the age where we have humongous of personal information being processed. The age of artificial intelligence is the age we have massive data being processed every second. And this humongous data has a major part of it involving privacy. So privacy professionals should be involved when it comes to the design of technology infrastructure that handles information of people. Then privacy as the default setting. When it comes to configuring the infrastructure, the application systems, privacy should be the default setting. That will really help a lot to safeguard against a lot of attack against privacy. Full functionality, positive sum, not zero sum. In other words, some organization will say, oh, if we major on security, it's going to affect privacy because the investment on the resources on the security will not allow them to make appreciable investment in privacy. That shouldn't be. It should be win and win. It should be gain and gain. And my own advice to many organizations I've come in contact with is prioritize security, prioritize privacy. Do not prioritize security, at the expense of privacy. It is really, really important. So it should be a positive sum, not a zero sum. And the other one is end-to-end security, full life cycle protection. It is hand-to-hand. For the fact that we start as privacy by design does not mean that the organization should hand off. No, privacy continues from the design to development to deployment to implementation, even to retirement. Privacy should be hand to hand, and security also hand to hand. Visibility and transparency, keep it open. Keep it open. Whatever information of people that are being collected or personal information data that are being collected, let it be open, be transparent to the data subject, to the data controller, to the data processor, and even to the regulatory body. Nothing more, nothing less. The respect for user privacy. User privacy is really, really essential. I have taken us through the rights of the user, and such rights should be respected in order not to violate the Privacy Act. And coming gradually to the end of our webinar for today, let's quickly take a look at another scenario and a couple of questions, and that will be the wrap up for the day. So the second scenario goes like this. Fastech Incorporation is a thriving startup that provides infotainment content as part of its strategic plan to compete favorably. It's intended to digitize to establish a global presence. This action would require collecting, processing, storing, and disposing of customers' personal identifiable information. At the advent of global pandemic, Fastech promptly adopted company-wide remote access and bring your own device practices for all their employees. 2 weeks after the implementation of these practices, Fastech got hit with a malware attack that breached the personal data of 80% of its customers. Incident information linked the origin of the attack to the personal device of a junior employee who visited a compromised site and downloaded a malicious app while working remotely with the same device. The company has so far received public condemnation for the breach. The question is, what should have been done to avoid this situation? This is the solution from CyberGuard Lounge professionals. Recommended solution. The first thing, when Fastech Incorporation decided to begin the practice of bring your own device and remote access to all the employees, perhaps maybe prior to that time, only selected employees were given remote access. But because of the global pandemic, all the employees were given remote access, and they're also allowed to bring their own device to attach it to the corporate network. The first thing that Fastech Incorporation should have done would be they should have conducted a privacy impact assessment before implementation. In other words, how will those two practices, how would they affect the privacy of their customers' information in terms of safeguarding it against attack, against unauthorized access, against any form of malicious targets. The second one is review the remote access working and bring your own device policies to address privacy requirements. In other words, we assume that Fastech Incorporation have existing remote access working policy and bring your own device policies. They should have reviewed it when they decide to allow all their employees to be involved in those two practices. They should have reviewed their policies and see what other high-level controls can be embedded in the policies to ensure that it will adequately safeguard the privacy data of their customers. Then the third one, deployment of client VPN to remote access, while endpoint control like web content filtering, data loss protection, and mobile device management for bring your own device. So all these technical controls also should have been adequately deployed for all the devices that will be, that will be attached to the network, for them to be sure that they are being protected against malicious attack. And practice questions. The certified data privacy solution engineer at CyberGuard Lounge has recommended to the IT management of its clients to remove superfluous program, account functions, applications, ports, permissions, access, etc. So attackers and malware have fewer opportunities to gain a foothold within the organization's IT ecosystem. What is this called? What is this called? It is, anyone can answer that? It is also privacy impact assessment. Because the certified, if you look at the question carefully, the certified data privacy solution engineer at CyberGuard Lounge has recommended that the IT manager of its clients to remove superfluous programs. So in other words, he has actually checked carefully about the infrastructure in the organization, and we have seen so many functionalities that were activated but not in use. So there is a need to change. There is a need to change them. So it's that process is privacy impact assessment on high level, which eventually will now lead to the system handling of the organization to harden the system being used in the organization. Then the second question is, a new security manager is concerned about the increase in connected devices that may be present on the enterprise network. What tools can best determine the extent of these situation? What this question is basically focusing on is that a new security, or let's say privacy manager, in an organization suddenly is concerned about the increase of connected devices to the enterprise network. Maybe they have already instituted, or maybe they have implemented bring your own device policy. And so all kinds of devices are just connecting to the corporate network. What can be done? And we have various options. The best option that can be done is what too can best be done to determine the extent of this situation. In other words, to find out how many devices are connected to the network in the first place, and to understand those devices one by one and to profile them. The best thing is option C, network discovery scan. First of all, scan the network to know or to understand or to identify all the hosts on that particular network. So that is the answer for the second question. Thank you so much for being part of this webinar. As I've made mention, is the first part of our Age of Cyber Privacy. The second part will be on very soon. Just keep a tab on our page, on our YouTube page. We will notify you when we're going to have our second part. And we want to thank you for being part of this webinar. Thank you for your time. And if you want further clarification, you can reach out to us at CyberGuard Lounge. We have competent professionals who can offer top-notch advisory services on your security and privacy concern. And if your own need is training around security or privacy, CyberGuard Lounge is a place to be. And I can assure you that there are well-experienced, well-skilled professionals who will not only take you through the classroom aspect of the security and privacy, but also give you the opportunity to have the hands-on experience. Thank you very much, and bye for now.